Hey folks, Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and I have yet another edition of I was about to say reader question roundup. I don't know if anybody follows both of these channels, but that's what I used to do at my old blog, Dead Tech, and my YouTube channel there. But no, this is not a reader question roundup. It is just the weekly edition of the Hit Subscribe Freelancer Q&A. So some overlap, but anyway, I probably could have just gone back and edited this out, at least for YouTube, but what would be the fun in that? Having gotten completely off the rails, let's dive into this week's topic. So this is kind of interesting. The question is, how many freelancers does it take to screw in a light bulb? Wow, I'm really on a roll here. The question is, how many hours should a freelancer work per day and or per week? So I generally, I'm not the hugest fan of framing things in kind of a best practices context-free way like this. No offense, I appreciate people coming in and asking questions. It's just there's something about the nature of that question that I feel like almost misses the point. And I was actually just having this kind of discussion somewhere where somebody was asking a question like, how should I promote my content? And that, how many hours should I work as a freelancer, or how should I go about promoting content that I make? It sort of strikes me as asking the question, what direction should I drive? I don't know. Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do? So, I'm not trying to be pedantic or anything, but the question of how many hours should a freelancer work, per day or per week or per whatever, is really kind of goal dependent. How much of a tolerance do you have for working? Are you fully employed in moonlighting? Because probably if you are, not 40. But I'm going to try to dig in absent the context and maybe move this a little bit away from best practices, if you will. There is no set amount of hours that a freelancer should work in a day or a week or any time frame. It's really, the answer to this question is going to depend on some things about your practice, like what you're trying to do. So let me dive into that and hopefully keep this general enough to be helpful, but also understand that it's really, in some sense, a fairly personal question that only you can answer for yourself. So the main determining factors here, I would think, would be kind of how much of a tolerance for work do you have? And you shouldn't view it as a virtue to say, oh, I could work 100-hour weeks. I get that in up or out type firms in the consulting world or Wall Street, when you're 25, the answer to that is I'll sleep when I'm dead or whatever. That's a good way, I guess, to grind it out for 2 or 3 years and make partner or whatever. But if you're establishing your own business or a freelance practice, working an amount like that has diminishing in the negative returns, meaning the people, it's kind of it makes me think of med school. My brother went through med school, and the way that doctors work is kind of bananas in the US, where if you have somebody that's working 36-hour shifts, anybody, I don't care who you are, at the end of a 36-hour shift, you are terrible at what you're doing. That's the same thing as working drunk. It's just mind-boggling to me that the US medical system does that. Anyway, the idea here is, however much you might be willing to work 100-hour weeks, you're not going to be good at what you're doing. So at a certain point, working more and more hours leads you to diminishing returns. You get less and less productive, and then eventually negative returns, somewhere around hour 80. You don't just get non-productive, you get negatively productive. You start doing work that's so bad it actually hurts you. So the answer to the upper bound of the question, how much are you available or willing to work, isn't purely one of grind and wanting it. There is an actual upper bound answer to that at which you will become a problem. So it's worth taking an honest assessment and not thinking that gritting it out or white knuckling it will do the trick. If you are working on something that, actually I've been writing up something recently. This is a good example. As a content creator, I can write a blog post, and I like to think a decent one, in 2 hours. That doesn't mean I can write 4 blog posts in 8 hours. There are certain types of pursuits that, maybe require a great deal of concentration for a small stretch, and then you need a break from it. So you need to take an honest look at the nature of the work that you're doing and how much of it can you do productively, not how much of it can you grind and do if forced, but how much of it can you do where you're doing it well and you're doing it efficiently and you're doing it in a profitable way. So that's kind of on the upper bound, like how much can you tolerate the work that you're doing, depending on a variety of factors. And then on the lower bound, there's the question of, like how much bandwidth you have, or, what's enough for what you're trying to do. So if you have a partner that has, stable income and you're just kind of working for beer money for both of you, maybe you only want to work like 10 hours a week or something, and that's fine. You don't need the money per se, so anything's a bonus. Or maybe you have a bunch of kids and mortgages and stuff, and you need to, bring in a lot of money. That's all going to inform it as well. So, I'm rambling a bit, I suppose, but in the end, you have to kind of think about a window that puts you in where you're working enough to achieve your goals, but you're not working so much that you're burning out. And that, upper bound might be lower if you like hate what you're doing or something. So you really need to think of it in terms of what is a sustainable amount of work that you can do in general, and then work backwards and kind of say, does the practice that you're building or creating or running fit into that at the rates, which I'll get to in a moment, at the rates that you'll command, like given how much availability you have, if you will, to work, can you charge an amount where the resulting income is what you need it to be? That's really the question. And there are situations where the answer to that might be no. So, speaking of being a doctor, if you were like, well, I don't have a medical degree, but I'm going to practice some unlicensed medicine here, and I'm going to charge $1,000 an hour, good luck. You'll probably get shut down by some legal entity and maybe put in jail. And even if you don't, I don't know how many people are going to be willing to pay you to do that. My point with this farcical, absurd example is you may say, I want the kind of job where I can earn enough money working 3 hours a week, and maybe unlicensed surgery at $1,000 an hour would do that for you. But that doesn't mean you can get that work or that you're qualified to do it. So it has to fit in, within a set of parameters that I'll kind of go into here. So first of all, I think the first thing to understand when you're trying to map back, like how much you should work, you need to make a decision point as to how you are billing. So if you are a freelancer, most freelancers are going to be billing by the hour. And if you bill by the hour, you are literally selling hours of your labor, versus if you are doing a flat pricing kind of scheme, or a value pricing kind of scheme. In either case, you're just going to be quoting an amount for a project to a client and then delivering that project, that outcome, that deliverable, whatever it is. So it's going to be a little bit different in terms of how you reason through these things, depending on which of those buckets you're choosing. So for instance, if you are billing by the hour, then you need to think in terms of selling enough hours to justify your practice, your income, et cetera. And in a sense, the math there is kind of easy. So if you wanted to say make $10,000 in a month, and you were going to say that your hourly rate was $100 per hour, then you would need to work 100 hours per month. And let me, I guess, as a brief aside, because the question is how many hours per day or per week should you work? The scenario I just constructed is probably helpful, because all you really need to do is have 1,000 billable hours in that month if your goal is $10,000 a month. So in a sense, it doesn't really matter how many in a day. I mean, what are there, like 30? So you could do 3 hours per day, 7 days a week, all month, and probably get to that figure. Or you could, really batch it up and do 10-hour days and just 10 of those in a month. Kind of up to you, as long as you could kind of swing the billables. Now, some of that will be impacted by if you're doing like staff augmentation, and you're telling a client that you want to work, 5 20-hour days in a month, and all of those days are going to be Saturdays and Sundays. Most likely the client isn't going to agree to that. So it'll start to maybe get into the size and shape of a work week if, things are somewhat dictated by your ability to communicate with clients and your availability. But really, it's kind of, in the billable hour world, a matter of figuring out how many hours of your time do you need to sell, and then finding buyers for those at a certain rate. what this has the effect of doing is kind of putting some guardrails on your work. So if you say I want to make $10,000 in a month, and you also say I'm probably not going to do more than 40 billable hours per week, call that 160 per month. It probably comes out to 173 or whatever the normalized month is, but you are going to have some limit there. So meaning if you're saying, actually, because I'm doing the math off the top, let's say you set an upper bound of 200 billable hours in a month, which is a pretty punishing work week, especially because not all of your hours are billable. I'll get to that in a moment. But let's say you said $200 a month or 200 hours per month. If you set an extreme upper bound of 200 hours in a month and you make $10,000 in a month, that means the math isn't going to work unless you're charging $50 per hour or more. Now, if when you get into the mix of it and you're trying to sell your labor, your hours to people, you discover that nobody's interested in paying you $50, you've got a math problem. Maybe they would only be willing to pay you $30. There's probably no amount of work you can do at $30 per hour that is going to get you to your $10,000 per month figure. So you need to reevaluate what you're doing or who your clients are, because the math isn't going to work for your needs. Your practice will probably fail. So that's the kind of math to do for the billable hour. It's really just how much can you sell your labor for by the hour, and then how much of that labor can you reasonably do. If you are flat pricing, then the risk, when you're billing by the hour, there's in a sense no risk to what you're doing, because as long as you can get people to pay you for that labor, the thing that you're really fixing into place is the easy math. So you're saying, well, okay, I am willing to work at most 200 hours in a month. I want to make $10,000. So I need to sell my hours for $50. And then if you convince somebody to give you that money, you just go do stuff for $50 an hour. And there's no real danger of you falling short or running over or anything like that. You front load all of your risk by negotiating an hourly rate. Once somebody signs a contract to that effect and starts paying you, there's pretty much no risk. Even if you do an absolutely terrible job, you're still getting paid. The sort of pro and con of going to flat or value pricing, where you just say, okay, I'm going to build you a website and charge you $10,000. Now you're taking on some risk and saying, well, I better hope that on my side, because my tolerance, for this type of income is I don't want to work more than 200 hours and I want to make $10,000. I better be able to deliver this website in a month, and ideally not by working more than 200 hours. So flat pricing, you remove the risk from the client. The client's just paying a predictable amount for an outcome or a deliverable. You assume that risk. The bad side of that is you can wind up working way more hours than you wanted to, or you can wind up, it takes you 2 months instead of one. Now you're only making $5K a month. Both of those are bad outcomes for you. But on the flip side, if you figure out how to get really good at delivering websites, and you can deliver that website in a week or 2 weeks or something for $10,000, now suddenly your effective hourly rate soars. You can actually earn your $10,000 in a month by working only 1 week, and that's pretty good. So that sort of pricing structure, it lets you have more wiggle room in determining how many hours you're going to work, in the sense that you can keep bringing that figure down and do less and less billable hours. Well, it's not billable if you're flat pricing, but doing fewer and fewer like delivery hours and getting the same amount of pay. And that's pretty awesome, because then you have a lot of control. If you can do in a week a $10,000 website, if you want, you can do 4 of those in a month and then make $40,000 a month. Or if you're more lifestyle oriented, make your 10K a month and only work a week a month. Both of those are excellent outcomes. Both of them involve assuming that risk in the beginning, getting good enough at what you do to give flat prices, and then betting on yourself. And that really kind of changes the math that you're looking at with your practice. If you watch any number of videos on this channel, or just follow anything of mine in general, you will know that I am a huge advocate of not billing by the hour. I think that's a terrible construct. I understand why people do it, and I'm not even saying you shouldn't do it in the beginning with your practice, but I would actively look to get away from it, because it's going to put such a hard upper bound on how successful you can ever be. To really be successful in your practice, you need to figure out a way to give flat quotes, and then to get more efficient behind those and deliver more and more profit. Anyway, off of that soapbox, Whether you're billing by the hour, and this is especially frictional for hourly billers or hourly employees of agencies, I guess. But whether you're doing that or whether you're delivering flat or value pricing, one thing you need to understand going into your practice is you will never be spending all of your hours as billable. Meaning, it's easy as an employee if you show up and you're a software engineer at work. In the idealized version of that anyway, you spend all of your 40 hours a week software engineering. There's nothing else. That's what you do. You are a software engineer. If you are going off on your own, thinking that you're going to spend 40 hours a week or 100% of your time doing software engineering, you won't. At a bare minimum, you are going to need to send invoices and do the occasional sales call and maybe put up your website or whatever. There are things that you will be doing that you don't bill anybody for if you're an hourly employee. And likewise, there are things that you'll be doing if you're flat pricing websites or whatever. They're not going to be an engaged sale of a website. You will, again, be doing sales calls and sending invoices. There are things that you will have to do as a business owner that are not the technician aspect of your service delivery. Instead of, I mean, I've seen like custom app dev firms especially try to get their consultants close to 40 billable hours a week, or maybe they kind of lean on them and say like, we need 40 billables out of you, and anything else you do is a you problem that you're doing is extra work. You can do that to yourself too. I need to be billable 40 hours a week, so in the other 10 or 20 hours that I work, that's when I run my business. That's not, I mean, like, so from a humanitarian perspective, it's probably not healthy, but it's also not good business because it sort of involves you pretending that your work is purely billable and then treating the other aspects of your business as an afterthought that you're cramming in when you are in the airport or whatever. And that's not a healthy way to approach your business. I mean, imagine if you were a salaried engineer working for somebody and the parts of the business, like your career advancement and human resources and benefits and all that, that everybody was just kind of, doing that in their spare time between meetings and not treating it properly. Like, you wouldn't want to work for that company. That's trash. Likewise, any business or practice that you're building, there are elements related to the business that should deserve your actual attention, and you shouldn't be treating them as pain things that you need to do that you wish you didn't have to do. So it's hard to put a figure on this, but I would say you should assume that whatever you're doing, your structure with your business, somewhere between 10 and 25% of your time, even if you are just a pure technician and that's all you want to do is deliver your service, I would assume that somewhere between 10 and 25% of the time that you spend holistically doing professional work, 10 to 25% of that time will not be billable or will not be part of your service delivery. That time will be what is known in entrepreneurial circles, especially among bootstrappers, as working on your business instead of working in your business. I'm trying really hard to say that unsarcastically. And there's nothing wrong. It's a great differentiator. You just hear it so much in the circles that I run in that it gets a little like, but the idea is you are working in your business when you're a technician, when you're a software engineer, and you are doing billable software engineering work. You are working on your business when you're defining your invoice template, or when you are scripting out your sales call, or when you're trying to get better at your marketing. These things are known as working on your business. It's not in your business where you are the employee, if you will. You are the person whose labor is being sold. Instead, you're putting on your business owner hat and making your business better. And it is crucially important. I would argue that almost without exception, it's more important than the particulars of the technician stuff that you're doing, because it is going to make the difference between whether you just drift back into staff augmentation and employment, or whether you actually make it as a business owner and maybe even build an equity business. So do not sell that short. You need to do that. It's important. If in order to earn a living, you have to sell 40 billable hours a week, what this means is that, what would the math on that be? Somewhere between 44 and 50 hours a week is how much you will have to work, because that 40 hours is just, 75 to 90% of your time. So you are going to have to burn some midnight oil in order to get everything done. Likewise, If you want to cap it at 40, then you should assume that probably somewhere between 32 and 36 is where you're going to max out billably. So with that in mind, that's all the decision criteria I think you need in order to say for yourself, like how much you should work in a given week or day. So figure, you're going to have a certain amount of work you can tolerate. Put an upper bound cap on that. And I would say be pessimistic about it. So if you are a true grinder, I wouldn't go any above 50 as to the total amount that you can work in a week. If you are looking for something that simulates employment or something, maybe cap it at 40. Now, from there, cut out time to work on your business. And so if you are saying, I'm going to work all in 40 hours, figure that you will be able to do deliverable work 32 to 36 hours per week. Now, if you are selling your hours, the math gets kind of easy. You just have to try to dip your toe in the water and reason about how much you can sell your hours for. And then you can kind of do the math from there. So, okay, I can reasonably work 32 to 36 hours per week max. I think I can get $70 an hour, which, gives me an upper bound earning of X. I'm actually not going to do 32 to 36 times 70, but you get the idea. So that's telling you the maximum potential amount of billable work that you can do. You should also assume, if you're somewhat middle of the road, conservative on estimating what kind of hourly rate you can bill, that it isn't just that you will have to work on your business for some of that time. You should also not assume that your utilization of billable hours over the year is going to be 100%, meaning it would be great if you were guaranteed that you were going to be 32 to 36 billable hours in a week, but you might have dry spells. You're probably going to take some time off. So adjust again down your bucket of hours and then get a realistic assessment. When it comes to flat pricing, you just kind of need to, again, do some scenario modeling and say like, well, okay, I think, I can deliver this many blog posts or this many websites or whatever in a month or in a year. And I think, working this amount of hours per week is how I could, deliver that many things. So I would need to charge X for that kind of thing. And that's really the scenario modeling that you should do there. So it's kind of a combination of what is your tolerance for work, set an upper bound there. What is the amount of income that you would need, which is kind of your lower bound. And then can you make the math work in that window depending on your bill rate? So truly there is no right answer to this. I mean, if you need very little income, maybe you're a fire type and you've retired, but you want a little extra income, then you can work pretty few hours per week. So it's really going to depend on your scenario, but hopefully that framework that I've given you for thinking through and reasoning about that helps and leads to some productive things for you. And I will, catch you all next time.